Hope everybody's had a great week. As Delana mentioned about FCA, the FCA banquet is Thursday night. The church will have a table. If anybody would like to go and be a part of that and see that, anybody interested in maybe being a character coach or something like that would be a great thing to go see, because what the plan is this week, the way, in the past that they've had kind of like a speaker to come in and to share, which they do have a speaker to share a little bit, but the main part of the program this week is going to be showing what happens in the school for as a character as their meetings each week, and then they're going to also have a couple of the teams to show up, and they're going to have the character coach for that team to show kind of what happens in those things. Plus they also have all the reports and stuff that they normally do. So if anybody would like to go and be a part of that, it's going to be hamburger steaks, and so we're going to get a nice meal. But if you're interested and you'd like to go to learn more about it, let me know. Because I got to turn in an account for Wednesday for how many we have, which, like I said, we have a table which should be up to 8 people, but I think June and Steve's going to go, so we need 6 people if you're interested in going. So today I want to talk about adversity. Anybody had adversity? That's kind of a laugh there, ain't it? But and I'll tell you in just a second when I give you the meaning that I found of this, why I come up with this today. But adversity comes with a multitude of names: accidents, afflictions, bereavement, calamities, difficulties, disappointments, disasters, failures, hard times, hurts, miseries, misfortunes, reverses, ruin, sufferings, tragedies, trials, troubles, tribulations, or woes. I want to ask you for just a second, anybody that's had any one of those preceding issues, please stand. So look around. You're in good company. You can be seated. Yesterday, we took off and went to Danica's soccer game yesterday morning, and I was going to go to my dad's to work for a minute, but I sat down for just a second and I come across this poem. Cowboy poetry. Anybody seen it or heard any of the cowboy poetry? It's called The Horse Trade. I want to read it to you this morning. And what caught my eye on it, it was the name on there. It said Roan Hancock. If anybody don't know, in the past, back during the fall, I lost my mind and I bought a horse. But, yeah. Sometimes I ask myself, why was you that dumb? But anyway, I used to kind of fancy myself to be a cowboy back in the day, but like I say, the name Roan Hancock was on here. And Hancock is actually a bloodline that sometimes has a very bad name in some ways, but they're a tough, good quality horse that if you can deal with them, then you got a good one. If you can't, then you send them on down the road kind of deal. And that's kind of what this poem here leads to, but let me read it to you right quick. It says, and it's kind of a little bit longer than I'd like to share, but it really has the point that I want to share. It says, I traded for a horse one time. He wouldn't take no beauty prize, a great big long-eared blue roan gelding. Not too bad for weight or size. I had to make some tough old circles, and this trader guaranteed that this horse would show me lots of country and not need much rest or feed. He said, now this here ain't no kid's horse, but he'll pack you up the creek, and he'll bump up on some occasions. In other words, he'll buck. And he has been known to kick. I wouldn't trade him to just anyone without having some remorse. But if you're sure enough cowpuncher, mister, he's your kind of horse. I stepped on that horse the next morning, and he began to buck and to bawl. That trader maybe hadn't lied none, but he hadn't told it all. Because we sure tore up the country where he throwed that equine fit, and I almost ran out of handholds by the time he finally quit. I guess that must have set the pattern. Things just never seemed to change. And although I showed him lots of country, every corner of the range, but every time I'd ride that booger, why, he'd keep me sitting tight. I knew I'd make at least 3 bronc rides before he'd pack me home that night. There you go. And that's kind of that Roan, or that Hancock bloodline is what they're known for sometimes. And it goes on to say, which would have been okay with a lot of horses that I've known. I've knowed. My wife don't like when I use that one, but he said, but that old pony had my number, and I just barely got him rode. The thing that really spooked me and put a damper on my pride was he was learning how to buck faster than I was learning how to ride. I pulled into camp one evening, and it was getting pretty late, and I seen this gray horse in the corral, and there's a saddle by the gate. I looked that gray horse over, and I sure liked what I seen. Then this kid showed up around the barn, and he must have been about 16. He said he'd lamed that gray that morning coming down off the granite grade, and I wondered if he had a horse, and he wondered if I had a horse I might trade. He said he didn't have time to stop and rest and let him heal, and since that beggars can't be choosers, that he'd make most any kind of deal. When a fella's trading horses, why, most anything is fair. So I traded him that blue roan for his gray horse then and there. But then my conscience started hurting when I thought of what I did to trade a fly-blowing dink like that off to some wet-nosed kid. So the next morning after breakfast, I tells him, listen, lad, if you want to know the truth, that trade you made last night was bad. That old blue roan horse is a tough one, bad as anyone you'll see. He'll kick you, strike you, stampede. He's a sorry rascal. And all I can do is ride, and it's all I can do to ride him, and I'll tell it to you straight. I think you're awful lucky just to ride him past the gate. There's 2 or 3 old horses there in that saddle bunch that ain't got much going for them, but I kind of got a hunch that they'll probably get you where you're going if you don't crowd them none. But I hate to see you ride that blue roan booger, son. He said, I told you there last night that I'd make most any kind of trade, and I appreciate you telling me what a bad mistake I made. But my daddy told me when you're trading, no matter how you feel, even if you take a whipping, that a deal is still a deal. That horse you say has lots of travel, and he's not too bad for speed. Well, sir, I'm kind of in a tight, and that's exactly what I need. I traded for him fair and square. When I pull out of here this morning, that's the horse I'm going to ride. I watched him cinching up his saddle, and he pulled his hat way down. He stepped right up into the rigging like he was headed straight for town. Stuck both spurs in his shoulders and got the blue roan hair a-flying. Tipped his head straight back and screamed like a hungry mountain lion. You know, I've heard a lot of stories about the bucking horse ballet, and I've heard the poetry in motion, but the ride I saw that day just plumb completely defied description, that I can see it plain, like it had happened in slow motion and was branded on my brain. I don't suppose I could explain it to you, even if I tried. The only thing that I can say is, by the saints, that kid could ride. He sat there plumb relaxed like he was lying home in bed, and every jump that pony made, that kid a half a jump ahead. When it was all over, I decided that I could learn a few things still, and I said, son, I'm awful sorry I misjudged your riding skill. He said, shucks, oh, that's okay, mister, as he started on his way. But if you think this horse can buck, don't put your saddle on that gray. You know, sometimes we think we got it bad, don't we? But somebody's usually got it just a little bit worse. You know, sometimes you think you're seeing what somebody else has got and it's better, but you don't ever know. But it goes on, and other things, sometimes adversity comes on us unexpectedly. And sometimes it comes after repeated warnings, right? I think about kids. We tell them, don't touch that, it's hot. Don't touch that, it's hot. Don't touch that, it's hot. What do they keep doing? Ah! Yeah, it was hot. I done told you, right? And that's the same way we are. We keep doing things after repeated warnings, don't we? We keep, we see we see signs with the speed limit posted on it. We just keep doing what we want to until we finally get caught, right? Sometimes those adversities that we cause on ourselves, but adversities might be temporarily discomforting or permanently disabling, and even life-threatening or life-taking. Think about that. Adversity can be hard, it can be rough, it can be nasty. But some adversities are merely higher hurdles over which we can climb with a little more effort. Right? Some of them just enough of a hindrance that we got to put out just a little bit more effort to get by them. While others permanently wound us, forcing us to find a way to triumph despite them. Adversity literally means something acting against you. We all got something acting against us, and it's called Satan in the kingdom of hell and all his demons, right? And he's looking for any way, any purpose, anything he can do to disrupt you, to knock you off track, to nothing else, just to idle you, right? Because if you're idle, you're not doing what God's called you to do. You're not going where you need to go. So I got 4 things here of where adversity comes from, and then there's 4 of what we can do or how we should go about it. So where adversity comes from, the first one, the Bible describes how we bring adversity on ourselves by acting foolishly or sinfully. Right? Anybody ever acted foolishly or sinfully and caused those adversities to come on yourself? I ain't going to ask you to stand up again, but most of you probably should be standing right then, right? But I think about some of the key individuals that have went through adversity because of their own bad mistakes. Think about Saul, right? Saul was anointed as king of Israel. He was head and shoulders above everybody else. He was what we would consider to be a great leader by eyesight, right? And he started out well. He started out good. But then he began to depend on himself and other things, right? And he made bad decisions, and those bad decisions caused him to derail and cost him his life, cost him his family the kingdom as well, right? David was called a man after God's own heart, right? He was skipped over by everybody else except for God. David, like most everybody else, has failed at some point in life. He failed, and then in that sinful time, he had to suffer the consequences for his failures, right? So we can cause those things by our own actions, right? We talked about healing this morning, and I didn't realize just how much it correlates right along with this. But the second one is God himself sometimes sends adversity to us, right? Either as a punishment for sin or simply as a way to test us or strengthen our character. How many of you like to have your character strengthened? I don't see no hands. Nobody likes it, right? But when we get through it, it's a whole lot better, ain't it? I think about weightlifters and those kind of, strength, getting stronger. What does it take to get there? You got to have adversity, right? You got to push against the weight. That's adversity. In order to grow muscles, in order to grow physically, you got to be able to go through the adversity. And when you come out on the other side, you come out with a great physique like this. No. Wrong. It takes a lot of effort to get a physique like this, but it ain't from lifting weights. But God uses those things. He can use anything that we do, anything that we go through. And Judges chapter 10, verse 7 through 10 says, So the anger of the Lord was hot against Israel, and he sold them into the hands of the Philistines and into the hands of the people of Ammon. From that year they harassed and oppressed the children of Israel for 18 years. All the children of Israel who were on the other side of the Jordan and in the land of the Amorites and in Gilead. Moreover, the people of Ammon crossed over the Jordan to fight against Judah also, against Benjamin and against the house of Ephraim, so that Israel was severely distressed. And the children of Israel cried out to the Lord, saying, We have sinned against you, because we have both forsaken our God and served the Baals. God let them have adversity because they was sinning against Him, right? They made other idols and different things, and all that was because of their actions, right? Every action has an opposite or equal reaction, right? And that same thing goes with God. And another scripture to go along with that is Hebrews chapter 12, verse 5 through 11 says, And you who have forgotten the exhortation which speaks to you as to sons, my son, do not despise the chastening of the Lord, nor be discouraged when you are rebuked by Him. For whom the Lord loves, He chastens, and scourges even every son whom He receives. If you endure chastening, God deals with you as with sons. For what son is there whom a father does not chasten? But if you are without chastening, of which all have become partakers, then you are illegitimate and not sons. Furthermore, we have had human fathers who corrected us, and we paid them respect. Shall we not much more readily be in subjection to the Father of spirits and live? For there indeed, for a few days chastening us as seemed best to them, but He for our profit, that we may be partakers of His holiness. Now no chastening seems to be joyful for the present, but painful. Nevertheless, afterward it yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness to those who have been trained by it. We don't like it, but we come out a whole lot better on the other side of it. And then, that's number 2. Number 3 is Satan, right? So he sends adversity to try to get us to sin. Who would be our key person to pick out on that? I think would be Job, right? It tells us in Job chapter 1 and also in Job chapter 2. It says Satan was walking to and fro about the earth, right? Looking for somebody to afflict, somebody to bring trouble to. And he met with the Lord, and the Lord said, Well, have you thought about my servant Job? He said, Yeah, I thought about him a lot. Paraphrasing, and that's what the devil was saying. He said, Yeah, but I can't get to him because you got a hedge around him. Probably some of us feel like we've been dealing with him some lately too, right? But Job didn't sin, right? Even Job's wife told him, said, Job, won't you just curse God and die? So, our own foolish decisions, and sometimes God sends adversity to us, and then the devil. And finally, there's adversity that comes from poor decisions or sin of others. Anybody ever had to suffer consequences because of somebody else's actions? Poor decisions by somebody else? Exodus 20 in chapter 5 says, You shall not bow down to them nor serve them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children to the 3rd and the 4th generations of those who hate me. Sometimes we got to deal with things that our parents did, right? Our grandparents did, our great-grandparents, and our great-great-grandparents. We had nothing to do with it. But sometimes we suffer that iniquity and those issues. You know, whether that be physical, whether that be spiritual, whether that be mental, whatever, we deal with those things. And that's one of the 10 commandments where God said you shouldn't have no other gods before me, no idols, nothing. So then, with that being those 4, then the next part of it is the one thing that we can count on about adversity is that it will come, right? I heard a preacher talking about it this week. He said, if you're not in it, you're fixing to go in it, or you just came out of it. Right? That's life. You know, when anybody tells you any different, that you get saved and everything turns great from there on, they've lied to you. We ain't going to lie. But the question is what should we do when that arrives, when it gets there? Well, one of the first things that we should do, we ought to humbly seek the Lord and see if He will share with us why we're going through this trial. You know, and then be willing to change and then grow through the experience, right? Sometimes that's the reason why we keep going through the same adversity over and 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 over again, is because we never learned from it the first time, right? We never grew. We never, you know, how many of you failed a test in school and the teacher let you take it over again, right? Did you pass it that time or did you fail it? Most of the time they didn't let you take it again, but God will let you keep taking them tests if you keep failing. Lamentations 3 and verse 40 says, let us search out and examine our ways and turn back to God. So that's number one. Number two is really we need to get closer to God through the prayer, through word, and through support of other believers, right? You need to be in church. You need to be a part of a body. That makes a difference. Chronicles 28 and verse 20 says, and David said to his son Solomon, be strong and of good courage and do it. Do not fear nor be dismayed, for the Lord God, my God, will be with you. He will not leave you nor forsake you until you have finished all the work for the service of the house of the Lord. He's going to be with you. And number 3, if adversity is from your own sin, you need to repent and change. Pretty simple, ain't it? Turn and go the other way. Repent from it. Change your life. And then going along with the last 4, if adversity is from other people's bad decisions, remove yourself from the equation if possible. Remove the situation, remove the person, whatever it needs to be. Get away from those things. I know it's all pretty simple, you know. But really in that last part of that poem that I read, I ain't very long-winded this morning, and to be honest, I still had a couple minutes left back there this morning, so before she come back there hollering, we got to stop. If they'll come on back. But the last part of that poem, it says, you know, I've heard a lot of stories about the Bucking Horse Ballet. I've heard of poetry in motion, but the ride I saw that day just completely defied description, though I can see it plain. Like it happened in slow motion, it was branded on my brain. I don't suppose I could explain it to you, even if I tried. The only thing that I can say, by the saints, that kid could ride. He sat there plumb relaxed like he was laying home in bed. And every jump that pony made, that kid's a half a jump ahead. When it was all over, I decided I could learn a few things still. We can learn things from it, right? And that's the thing we got to understand. And when I said, and I said, son, I'm awfully sorry I misjudged your riding skill. You know, sometimes when we look at people in their proverbial ride of life, and we think, well, they's a little better rider than I thought. Maybe you need to understand what they was riding versus what you've been riding. He just said, shucks, that's okay, mister, as he started on his way. But if you think this horse can buck, don't put your saddle on that gray. All horses are horses, right? But they're not the same. They're not all the same. It's just like adversities. All adversities are the same. They look good from where you sit. But until you go through the ride, you'll never know what somebody else is going through.
Yep.
But the key to all of it is who you looking at, who you looking to, who's your king. So as we begin to stand and worship here for just a moment, if anybody is going through adversity and they'd like to have prayer this morning, we'd be glad to pray with you and pray for you. Maybe you're just getting in the ride, or maybe you've been on it, you got it done, whatever it is. Just know that Jesus is the answer and the only way that you can make it. If you need Him today, this altar is a great place for that too.